Episode 1 of Ballard Season 1 starts with Ballard chasing after a suspect. The suspect opens fire, forcing her to shoot as well. Ultimately, Ballard is able to make the arrest just before her partner LaFont arrives. Following the arrest, superiors interview Ballard and LaFont to confirm that their actions adhered to policy. However, LaFont warns Ballard that the agents were fishing for dirt. Even after the rough night they've had, Ballard still shows up at work the following morning. We learn she is currently running the new cold case unit. It's a small unit with Ballard, LaFont, Colleen, Ted and Martina together. After closing their first case, Ballard is set on another. According to Ted, the case is actually a lost cause. The culprit left no evidence behind and no one is willing to talk to Ballard. As Ballard briefs her team, Counsel Perlman and Nelson arrive. Perlman is unhappy about the recent attention Ballard's last case has brought about. Perlman wants Ballard to focus on his sister's murder, and this is why he supported and helped her set up the team. Ballard reminds him that they have few resources and she needs something tangible before approaching a man named Brian. Now Perlman believes that Brian killed his sister, and Nelson threatens to dismantle the team if Ballard doesn't solve the Sarah Perlman case. We soon learn that Ted is friends with Perlman and he's there to keep an eye on Ballard. After the councilman leaves, Ballard focuses her attention on Sarah's case. Ballard understands that Perlman needs answers, and in the meantime she still has a John Doe case to solve. Unfortunately, the officer in that case quit and is dodging Ballard's calls. Ballard then visits the officer, Samira, and tries to get her to talk about the case. Samira is reluctant to cooperate, but claims that someone in the LAPD was covering something up. Back in the day, when she was working the case, a witness mentioned an altercation that happened before John Doe was killed and his baby went missing. According to Samira, someone deleted any trace of the altercation. Ballard invites Samira to her office to give her take on the evidence. The next day, Samira drops by to help with the case. After a quick introduction, Samira insists that she is only helping. She gives the team a better perspective on the case, as Martina brings up documents from Sarah's case, and Samira's curiosity is certainly piqued. LaFont notices that Ballard got the palm print that the killer has left behind. However, they're not sure if it's usable. Ballard is hoping to get some DNA from the print though, and she approaches the lab and begs Darcy to rush the results. Darcy agrees because she likes Ballard and thinks she was brave for calling out a rogue cop. In the evening, Ballard heads home. She lives with her grandma Tutu. Now Tutu notices that Ballard seems down and asks what's wrong. Ballard reveals that every time anyone mentions the past, it tends to trigger her. So Tutu suggests she tries to move on and start dating again. The following morning, Samira drops by the lodge where John Doe was last seen. She tries to talk to the manager, but he's actually quite uncooperative. One of the cleaners hears the conversation, and a little while later, she calls the police and asks to speak to Samira. Unfortunately, the call is forwarded to Samira's old partner, Olivas. The lady quickly hangs up after hearing Samira has quit. In the back of the office, Ballard talks to Colleen about her intuition. She worries that Colleen's intuition might actually undermine their case. The defense attorneys could use it to throw out the case though, so Samira drops by and mentions her visit to the hotel. The visit has left her feeling hopeless and reminded her of exactly why she quit. The case was 5 years ago, and she figures that now bygones are bygones. Ballard asks her to at least give it a day before she outright decides. Darcy calls Ballard here to inform her that they've got the DNA from the palm print. Ballard drops by Brian's tattoo shop and gets a call from Nelson, and Nelson reminds her that he would like to be updated throughout the case as she goes undercover at the tattoo shop and secretly collects Brian's DNA. Unfortunately, Brian notices and takes his glove from her. The case has already ruined his life and he wants nothing to do with the police. Meanwhile, Olivas tracks down Ballard and her team. Samira seems flustered to see her old partner, and Ballard seems angry to see him too. Ballard turns him down and sends him on his way, insisting that Olivas calls next time. He mentions something about burying the hatchet, but she clarifies that she's not willing to do that. Later, Ballard goes for a surf session to de-stress. She talks to the lifeguard there, Aaron, and promises to call him later. She heads out to meet with Samira next and tries to convince the latter to join the team. Samira does want to join the team, but is actually hesitant. The past is still weighing down on her, so Ballard brings up her side of the story. She reveals that she was demoted for trying to bring down Olivas, so Ballard also adds that she pulled up the cold case because Olivas worked on it. She invites Samira to join her and do some good, so Samira agrees and heads back to the lodge. At the lodge, she finds a crowd and learns that Yulia, the lady who called for Samira, is actually dead. She was killed while cleaning one of the rooms. Simultaneously, Darcy calls Ballard and informs her that Sarah's killer is linked to another case. He might have killed another woman called Laura Wilson back in 2008. Now Ballard pulls Laura's case files and starts to investigate. She worries that they have a serial killer on their hands, and unfortunately she's displeased to learn that Bosch was the officer in charge of this one, which is where episode 1 comes to an end. Episode 2 of Ballard starts with Ballard arriving at the lodge crime scene. She introduces herself to Detective Nalon, the man in charge. Now Nalon is unhappy that she's on his turf, but tries to be accommodating. He allows her to check the crime scene and promises to call her once he gets the ballistic report. Now before leaving, Ballard talks to the manager and checks out the CCTV footage too. Unfortunately, the murder was not caught on camera, but a suspicious man catches her attention. She quickly takes a picture before leaving. Outside, Samira waits and Ballard tells her that they will secretly work the case together. She calls Lafont and sends him the victim's details. Now Lafont asks her to call Bosch, but she refuses. Nalon believes Julia was killed in a robbery gone wrong, but Samira and Ballard think otherwise. They follow one of Julia's co-workers to a local salon. The woman refuses to talk since she's undocumented, but Ballard allows her to leave and talks to the salon manager instead. The manager tells them more about Julia, but nothing substantial enough to be a lead. Luckily, she recognizes the unhoused man in the picture, but doesn't know his name. They head back to the office and debrief the team. Ted is frustrated to be sent on the hunting mission, while Ballard and Samira start creating the case board and going through all the evidence they've collected so far. Ballard leaves to talk to Laura's mum, but runs into Perlman. He's mad that Ballard is looking into Julia's and Laura's cases. Ballard tells him about the connection between Sarah and Laura here, and also reminds him that all cases are important. As they talk about the cases, it dawns on Perlman that Brian might not have actually killed his sister. Now Brian was doing a military tour, and Ballard promises to get Perlman answers and calls Lafont to check out Brian's alibi during Laura's murder. Lafont suggests they bring Bosch in, but Ballard refuses. After all, this show is called Ballard and not Bosch. The visit with Laura's mum doesn't go as smoothly as Ballard had hoped. As she leaves Laura's mum's house, someone starts tailing her. Unfortunately, Ballard doesn't actually realise she's being followed and heads to a therapy session where we learn that someone tried to rape her. Her therapist worries that Ballard is too hurt by the betrayal by her fellow officers. Ballard switches the topic back to the shooting, but on her way out, she runs into Olivaz and 2 other male officers. One of the officers makes a crude sexual joke, pissing Ballard off. Back at the office, Colleen finds the last advert that Laura worked on. Martina finds a possible connection between Laura and Sarah too, coming in the form of the drama club that Sarah was part of. The killer might have actually met them through acting classes, but we'll have to wait and see whether that's the case. Lafont gets an update on Brian's alibi here, forcing them to drop him as a possible suspect. It also turns out that Leighton never submitted the bullet that killed Julia to ballistics. Ballard sends Lafont to do it instead, and Colleen offers to join him. However, Ballard visits Brian and apologises to him. Brian is relieved to hear he's cleared, but sends her away. In the meantime, Samira joins Ted in searching for the unhoused man. After a while, their search leads them to a guy named Frosty. Ballard joins Samira and Ted to make an arrest, but Frosty tries to make a run for it. He ends up breaking his leg, and given that Frosty is hurt and too high, they call it a day and drop him at the hospital first. After a long day of working, Ballard calls Aaron after getting hurt during the arrest. Now Aaron drops by her house and says she only calls him on the bad days. They end up sleeping together and Aaron accidentally flashes Tutu the following morning. Whoops. On the other side of town, Ballard meets with the captain after Nalon reports her for working her case. The captain sides with Ballard here and asks her to take over the case since she arrested Frosty. However, the captain asks her to close the case perfectly or she's going to lose it outright. Before heading to the office, Ballard drops by ballistics. She begs Freddie to run the ballistics on her John Doe case and prioritise the Julia case. She later meets with Samira at the hospital to interrogate Frosty. Unfortunately for them, Frosty suffers from mental issues. Even when sober, he can barely make a coherent sentence. Samira and Ballard believe that someone intentionally paid Frosty to kill Julia because he was too lost already. When asked about the gun, Frosty claims he buried it and it turned into roses. With no clear answers, Ballard and Samira leave. At the office, Colleen is still traumatised by her first visit to the morgue. Lafont comforts her and they get back to the case. Now Ballard sends Samira and Ted to try to find the gun that Frosty disposed of. Bosch makes an impromptu visit here and asks to talk to Ballard in private. He's unhappy she didn't reach out, but he doesn't take it too personally. Once again, he got the memo from Amazon. His show's called Ballard and not Bosch. He invites her for lunch and tries to encourage her to find the silver lining in her current situation. Bosch also mentions that he found the alibis of 2 witnesses problematic in the Laura case. Back on the streets, Samira and Ted find Frosty's gun near a rose mural. Samira calls Ballard and they rush the gun to Freddie. Unfortunately, the gun one can only be linked to Yulia's case. As for the John Doe case, Freddie says the bullet was never presented and thus never analysed. Samira is sure she called in to request the bullet analysis but couldn't follow up as she left the force. But now, she is certain someone in LAPD wants this case to go unsolved. The scene then cuts to Ballard's stalker calling someone. He assures the other party that the case is closed and Frosty will be taking the fall. The other party then gives him new instructions, and the episode ends with the stalker arriving at work, and we learn that he's actually a police officer. Episode 3 of Ballard starts with our titular character out surfing. Later, Tutu gifts Ballard with a new surfing board, but the latter rejects the gift. Meanwhile, Samira is at home helping her mum look after her sick dad. Samira is still hiding her return to the force from her family. Elsewhere, Ted secures a new client for his security company. Colleen visits a church while Martina studies. As for LaFont, he spends the morning with his husband and dog. On the way to work, Ballard calls LaFont. Now, LaFont informs her that he tracked down one of the witnesses that Bosch mentioned. One of them is actually dead, but they hope they can talk to the other guy, and as they speak, the captain calls to summon Ballard. The captain asks Ballard to look into a new cold case that has gone viral after the victim's sister protests gained public attention. The case involves a young fraternity man who suspiciously fell to his death at the fraternity house. The class has an upcoming reunion, and the sister has been protesting outside the university calling for justice. She believes the university covered up her brother's murder, so Ballard talks to the lady and reopens the case. At first glance, it does look like Nick's death is actually accidental, but Ballard notices an inconsistency in the autopsy report. It seems like Nick was hit before his death. At the office, Colleen spots a mouse and thinks it's actually a good sign. She's currently looking for Yulia's family in Ukraine to share the sad news. On the other hand, Samira runs into a roadblock when following up on the John Doe bullet. She calls Ballard for help, and the latter advises her to work on getting her badge back. Samira needs her firearm qualifications before being fully reinstated. Unfortunately for them, they learn that someone disposed of the bullet. Ballard insists on getting a copy of the dispo order, which strengthens Samira's concern that someone in LAPD is actually dirty. However, Ballard asks her to keep it on the low and focus on her reinstatement for the time being. Back to Nick's case, LaFont and Ballard drop by the class reunion. On the way there, LaFont notices Ballard keeps ignoring calls from her former partner, Chastain. After talking to the fraternity brothers, LaFont and Ballard conclude that they are actually hiding something. After a team debrief, they agree to target the weak link in the group and get him to turn on his brothers. The plan works, and the man mentions a book that the fraternity boys hid before the police got on the scene. Ballard's team visits the fraternity house next and confiscate those books. It turns out the brothers kept a book detailing their sexcapades with the girls and grading the experience. The pages are filled with pictures of the girls, and it's very detailed. On the personal front, Ballard completes her mandatory therapy. Her therapist advises her to face her trauma, but Ballard refuses to open up. She also refuses to work on the surfing board Tutu got for her, as it reminds her too much of her dad. The following day, Ballard gets a copy of the dispo order and learns it was signed by a cop named Charlie Grant. He's currently retired and didn't work on the John Doe case. Ballard informs Samira that she has to tell LaFont about their suspicions, but Samira is hesitant despite Ballard insisting that they can trust him. Ballard and LaFont then visit Charlie, and he accuses them of lying. He denies signing the dispo order and shows them his real signature. At the end of the meeting, Charlie warns LaFont to be careful with Ballard. On the ride back, LaFont assures Ballard that he is on her side. He cautions her to tread carefully, as corrupt cops are as dangerous as they come. Meanwhile, Samira confides in her granddad about her internal conflict. Her granddad, who is a former cop, understands what she's actually going through. He advises her to go back and keep an eye on things. And in the meantime, a drunk Chastain corners Ballard to apologise. He feels guilty for failing to believe her and for not having her back. Chastain apologises, but Ballard refuses to hear him out. She heads home and talks to Tutu instead. Tutu advises her to bring her walls down, and at the office, Ted starts putting more effort into bonding with the team. The scrapbook gained actually opens the case up, as it gives them some solid leads. They start investigating the women who slept with Nick, and in the previous investigation, the police didn't actually talk to the ladies as they had no idea about this book. Ballard notices that there's a page missing. Thankfully, one of the women who slept with Nick gives them a lead about this missing page. Thanks to them, they arrest Nick's killer. It turns out to be Meredith, one of the women Nick slept with. She was hurt by what he wrote in the book about her, and in a moment of anger, she attacked a drunk Nick and pushed him off the balcony. As for the other entries in the book, the team sends the book to the sexual assault unit to follow up. After talking to her dad, Samira decides to pursue her reinstatement. Ballard changes her mind about the surfing board and starts working on it. And the episode then ends with Manny, the stalker cop, intentionally introducing himself to Martina at a restaurant. Episode 4 of Ballard starts with Ballard secretly meeting with LaFont and Samira to discuss their next move. They decide to keep their suspicions of the LAPD a secret until they can actually find some evidence. As they talk, Martina sends Ballard a message about the bullet. Later, Ballard and LaFont meet with Adam, one of the witnesses in Laura's case that Bosch said he found suspicious. Now Adam tells them that at the time Harmon was dating a closeted star. He lied to protect the guy's identity, but he didn't kill Laura. Now with Harmon dead, Ballard asks about the identity of Harmon's lover, but Adam refuses to reveal it. LaFont suggests that they find a different way to check Harmon's alibi without outing anyone. If things don't work out, they can always circle back to Adam. Now Adam also identifies the car he saw outside Laura's house as a Ford. Meanwhile, Colleen meets with the salon owner to get more information on Yulia. She's hoping to contact Yulia's family and notify them of the tragedy. And after getting back to the office, Ballard asks the team to focus on tracking down the Ford car seen outside Laura's house on the day of her murder. Now Martina also updates the team on the John Doe bullet that she and her friend managed to reconstruct from the bullet wounds. Now Ballard hopes Freddy can use the data to find out more, and Freddy links the bullet to a case related to Javier, who is currently serving time in county prison over firearm charges. As for Samira, she later apologizes to Ballard for getting heated during their morning meeting. Colleen finds a lead on Reddit about a car and decides to follow up. She ends up getting another victim. However, to find out more, she needs Ted's help since he has a badge. In the middle of the day, LaFont gets word that Chastain died in a car accident. Ballard tries to act indifferent, but her former partner's death certainly affects her. The following day, Samira and Ballard visit Javier in prison, but he refuses to say much. Fortunately, he identifies John Doe as Luca Ibarra, a coyote for the Zacatecas Nuevas. I hope I've said that right. I do apologise if I butchered that completely. Javier's alibi certainly checks out, and they focus on finding more information on the vans and Ibarra. Ballard uses work as an excuse to avoid her complicated feelings over Chastain's death, and while this is going on, Ted offers to connect Colleen with a guy from Ukraine to help her trace Yulia's family. Colleen later meets with Andre and briefs him on the situation. Their investigation into the vans brings up a new lead by the name of Coleman. The lead turns out to be another dead end. Later, Ted visits Jake's place to watch the game. Nelson brings up the case here, and Ted says that he's uncertain that Ballard is on the right track. However, he does believe that she's doing her best. In the evening, Ballard, LaFont and Samira meet at a bar for drinks. Samira got confirmation that Ibarra is their John Doe, and they start tracking down the next of kin to notify them. Samira and LaFont are surprised when Ballard says she won't attend Chastain's funeral. Fortunately, Ballard does change her mind and attends in the end. LaFont and Samira also attend for moral support, as Chastain's wife apologises and mentions that her husband regretted his decision. She also mentions that Chastain heard Olivas talking about another female cop who returned to the force. Based on the description, Ballard wonders if Olivas was talking about Samira. Simultaneously, Ted informs Colleen that Andre found out that Yulia's family was killed in the war. The next day, Javier contacts the team to make a deal. His lawyer states the terms and Javier starts singing like the canary. He mentions a group of dirty cops working for the cartels, and he alleges that these dirty cops are selling drugs and doing more for the cartel. As for the gun, he claims he got it from one of these dirty cops. He doesn't know the cop's real name, but gives them a clue on where to start. And after going through the case that Javier mentioned, they find a former cop by the name of Driscoll. Javier later identifies him as the man who gave him the gun. So Samira, Ballard and LaFont start digging into Driscoll's background. Samira is pleased to have confirmation of her suspicions finally, while Ballard tells her about the assault by Olivas. However, Samira doesn't mention what went wrong between her and Olivas, while the episode itself comes to an end with Driscoll meeting with Manny to talk about Martina. Episode 5 of Ballard starts with Ballard and Aaron out on a date. Whilst there, Ballard gets triggered when she misunderstands a customer's interaction with her waitress. Elsewhere, Driscoll calls Manny to get an update on the Martina situation. Manny assures him that he's working on winning Martina's trust, and the two are currently on a date where Manny is upping his charm game. Later, Driscoll meets with the Mafia to make a drop and mocks one of the snitches the Mafia is torturing. The following morning, Nelson drops by the office to talk to Ted. Nelson is worried that Ballard's investigation is one-dimensional and wants Sarah to be the top priority. He asks for a weekly check-in. The team focuses on the vehicle lead for now, but everyone except Colleen is feeling down. Colleen suggests they follow up on a car that was scrapped in 2009 that was registered to a woman named Jenny Garrison. Ballard asks Colleen and Ted to focus on the cars, while she and Zamira focus on something else. On the ride though, Ballard asks Zamira about her partnership with Olivas. Unfortunately, Zamira lies and says it was all good. The meeting with Jenny Garrison leads them to her ex-husband, Mike Garrison. Allegedly, he ran away with his mistress Denise back in the day, but no one has actually seen him since. Jenny refuses to allow them to collect Mike's DNA through their daughter. However, Zamira and Ballard go behind her back and contact the daughter, and thankfully she agrees to give her DNA and convinces her mum to do the same. Now LaFont's efforts certainly bear fruit when he links Driscoll to an undercover operation back in the day. Lucas Ibarra was named as one of the informants, and Ballard and LaFont track down the agent in charge of the operation. They discover that Ibarra was Driscoll's, but he allegedly disappeared after he got cold feet. Driscoll reported that Ibarra left for Mexico. However, Ballard and LaFont know exactly what happened and realise Driscoll took out Ibarra to protect the cartel. Now Driscoll did a good job covering everything up. In the evening, the two debrief Zamira and they come up with a new plan to survey Driscoll. After LaFont leaves, Ballard invites Zamira to her place for dinner. Whilst there, Zamira finally opens up about what happened with Olivas. It turned out he actually raped her, but then gaslighted her to think it was her fault. Ballard comforts and assures her that they will get justice for this. The next day, Ted and Colleen drive to Encino to look at the scrapped car report. Their investigation leads them to a storage unit under Mike Garrison's name. In the meantime, Ballard meets with Damani to check the court records and verify Driscoll's alibi on the day Ibarra was killed. Now Driscoll had claimed he was in court to testify, but there's actually no proof of this. Later that night, Martina brings Manny to the office. This gives him a chance to see how far they've got in their case, and he later meets with Driscoll and tells him that Ballard's team has no leads. He believes the team is more focused on Sarah's case, but Driscoll threatens to hurt Martina if Manny is wrong. At home, Zamira crashes out as she remembers what Olivas did to her. Meanwhile, Colleen follow up on the storage unit lead and they ask Ballard to get a warrant. Ballard arrives late, but just in time. The team calls for backup and opens a storage unit, and they're shocked to find what looks like the killer's trophies stored in little boxes, which is where episode 5 comes to an end. Episode 6 of Ballard starts with the police processing the evidence from the storage room under Mike Garrison. Now outside, Ballard tries to convince the captain that her small team can still work on the case. Jake exerts his influence to get her the case, and the captain agrees but gives her 72 hours to get something tangible. As the stress adds up, Ballard starts having more dreams about her dad. She spends most of her night at the office working on the case, while LaFont sets up surveillance near Driscoll's house. Zamira also talks to the Federales to help find Gail. At the prison, one of the nurses hears about Javier being moved to K10 and calls Driscoll. She tells him that the move came shortly after Javier met with some detectives. The next morning, the team starts working on the processed evidence collected from the storage room. Unfortunately, the killer has actually wiped everything clean, so there isn't much to work with. Ballard calls Jake and his dad Gary to look at the trinkets and identify which one belonged to Sarah. Sadly, they're unable to actually identify anything. Still, Ballard assures Jake that they will break the case soon. Darcy also summons Ballard and informs her that the dead body found in the mountains was that of Mike Garrison. His body was discovered back in 1997, meaning he's obviously not their killer, and this isn't a horror movie, so it's not like he's come back from the dead to kill either. Ballard visits the sheriff in the local town to pick up the files on Mike Garrison. Since he was a John Doe at the time, there isn't much to go on. However, Ballard finds a lead on Denise, the woman Mike was travelling with. It seems like she is the Jane Doe who was found in 1999. Unlike Mike, who was stabbed, Denise was strangled. This is in line with how the other female victims were killed. The team, especially Ted, is disheartened by the recent turn of events. It doesn't help that their 72-hour loop is closing quickly. Ballard decides to focus on the victims instead of the possible suspects instead. They start by trying to match the trinkets to the victims. After the call from the prison nurse, Driscoll puts a hit on Javier, but he survives. Ballard notices that Zamira is online stalking Olivas, and she talks to her calmly and encourages her not to let this affect her work. LaFont interrupts to tell them that Driscoll is back at his house. They put up night surveillance and Ballard falls asleep and has another nightmare of her dad, but is forced to leave when Driscoll makes a move. Ballard and LaFont follow Driscoll to a parking lot and see him meeting with an unidentified cop. Unfortunately, they're unable to get close enough to hear the conversation, but Driscoll seems disturbed as if he is getting ready to make a run for it. After that, they lose him and they go back to the office empty-handed. Samira, meanwhile, tracks down Gael's mum. The team continues to identify new victims but find no similarities other than the manner of death. Due to the investigation, they conclude the killer was watching his victims. With their leads running low, Ballard and Lafont meet Avril, Gael's mum. She's struggling with the loss of her child and Louis. She identifies Driscoll as the cop who was supposed to help her family, and she mentions a cartel member named Jesus, and upon looking him up, they discover Jesus has a link to Driscoll. Driscoll helped him out of a few arrest cases. Back at the office, Martina identifies a new victim killed a few months ago. They realise that the killer is still active, and once Jake realises that Garrison is a lost cause, he turns his back on Ballard. The case is taken over by a new unit, however Ballard continues looking up the trinkets and finds a solved case. The victim was allegedly killed by her boyfriend, but her bracelet was found in a storage unit. She visits the captain and uses this information to get back the case. Later that night, Samira confronts Olivas, but he mocks her. Olivas believes he is above the law and has no remorse about what happened. The meeting with Avril deeply affects Lafont here, and he dedicates more time to helping her find her son. After a long day, Ballard returns home and settles in. She falls asleep on the sofa and wakes up to a masked man strangling her. A fight ensues and Ballard crushes the man's windpipe. She calls 911, but they're still 5 minutes out. She then calls Aaron, who talks her through performing a field trachea. The guy turns out to be Driscoll, and he regains consciousness and pulls out the tube. Unfortunately, he dies instantly. Episode 7 of Ballard starts with the police questioning Ballard at her house after the Driscoll attack. Lafont asks them to postpone the interrogation and allow Ballard to go to the hospital. Before getting into the ambulance, Ballard secretly hands Driscoll's burner phone to Lafont and gives him some instructions. The following day, Lafont updates the team on what happened. They're all concerned about Ballard, who's currently recovering at hospital. He tells them that the attack is related to the John Doe case, but the sheriff is looking into it. As they talk, a couple of sheriff's officers walk in and take all their case files. At the hospital, the captain informs Ballard that the homicide department has taken over her 2 cases. He also puts a protective detail on Ballard and keeps her at a motel for the time being. Now at the motel, Bosch visits Ballard to update her on the phone. He's got the data from it and returned it to the chain of custody. As expected, Bosch wants to know what he is getting into. Ballard tells him about the corrupt cops, but Bosch chooses to help all the same. He tells her that the numbers on the phone will have to be traced manually as they're all from burner phones. Ballard tries to rest, but she finds she's unable to do so. So she heads to the office and fills everyone in on the truth. She asks the team to decide if they want out, but no one leaves. Since their current cases have been taken over, Ballard suggests they work on a new one. She checks her voicemail and listens to a call from a woman looking for her son. The woman, Lillian, is looking for a son who went missing. Her son's name is Ray and he was linked to a gang in Koreatown. The team wonders if people in the community are willing to talk now that the years have passed. In the chaos of the new case, Ballard forgets her meeting with Ochoa. Ochoa is currently in prison for the murder of a woman who Ballard just linked to her serial killer. She calls the prison to set up a new meeting. After talking to Lillian and Ray's brother Jun, they realise that the family want closure. They've made peace with Ray's death, but they want to find his body. They start looking into a fight that Ray had with a classmate before his disappearance. The former cops didn't look into it as they assumed the gang killed Ray. Now Marcus, the boy Ray fought with, doesn't tell them much. He says that the fight was blown out of proportion and that Ray was trying to recruit him into the gang. The team also put out a banner asking for a lead on a green Ford last seen near Ray's place. In the meantime, Lafont sends Ballard to her hotel to rest while Bosch chases down the burner phone lead. The following morning, Lafont calls Ballard to share a lead. A witness remembers seeing a green Ford near a hiking trail. The location is also the last place Ray's phone pinged, so Lafont and Ballard meet with the witness. In his statement, the witness explains he was urinating in the woods when a person emerged unexpectedly and drove off quickly in a green Ford. A quick search of the area leads them to discover Ray's body. Thanks to a sports injury, Ray had a metal plate on his shoulder. They also recover a gun at the scene, and the gun leads them to a woman named Fortson. Unfortunately, Fortson explains that she used to buy guns for a boyfriend who was involved in a gang. That boyfriend is long dead, and thus Fortson's alibi checks out. The following day, Ballard meets with Ochoa and gives him hope. She brings Ochoa's case to Damani and asks him to represent Ochoa in his appeal. Simultaneously, Lafont doubles down on his efforts to find Gael. Kylene tracks down a video of the fight and it leads him to one teacher called Mr. Kim. On the way to talk to Mr. Kim, Ted offers a security detail to Ballard, but she asks to think about it. Mr. Kim leads the team to Fortson's brother Eddie, who hated Ray. Ballard brings Eddie in, but his alibi also checks out. Now Eddie turns the tables on Mr. Kim and mentions that the teacher took his favourite elite students hiking on that trail. Later that night, Ballard accepts Ted's offer and returns home. Aaron helps him clean up, and just as he is about to confess his feelings to Ballard, she falls asleep. The team then switches its attention to Mr. Kim. Colleen discovers that at the time of Ray's death, Mr. Kim's mother used to own a green Ford. They contact the new owner and process it, and find conclusive evidence that Mr. Kim was on the hiking trail on the night Ray was killed. Before they can arrest Mr. Kim though, Jean holds the teacher hostage in his house. Thankfully, Ballard convinces him not to kill the teacher, and the case is then wrapped up with Mr. Kim in custody, and Ballard asks the DA to show Jean some leniency. The episode ends with Bosch calling Ballard and telling her that one of the burner phones from earlier, well, it's been traced back to Olivaz. Episode 8 of Ballard starts with a flashback to the night Ballard was attacked by Driscoll. It turns out that Olivaz dropped by and tried to get more information on the attack from the captain. Thankfully, even the captain didn't know much at the time. After that night, Olivaz started working on a plan to cover up his involvement with Driscoll and take over as the new boss. He also checked the case files to see how much Ballard knew. After this, he called an impromptu meeting with the other corrupt cops and promised them that they are safe. He also promised to take over Driscoll and keep their little side jobs going. Manny suggested they drop Martina, but Olivaz asked him to stay on her. Back in the present, Ballard briefs her team and they start looking into the other corrupt cops too. So far, they've identified only 4 dirty cops, and Manny is not on their list just yet. The team soon start identifying the remaining dirty cops one by one. Lafont uses his old connections to find the identity of the cop who met with Driscoll on the night they tailed him. On the side, Lafont also meets Gael's mum to get her DNA and continue with the search for her son. It's a long shot, but Lafont is determined. Meanwhile, Zamira is disappointed that the truth about Olivaz's sexual crimes won't come out. Ballard encourages her to still take the win and keep on marching on. Simultaneously, Ballard finds a new theory on the serial killer case. She calls the new detective in charge and leaves her a few voicemails. As for Martina, she accidentally sees Manny's burner phone when she visits him for dinner. She secretly takes pictures of his messages with Olivaz and rushes to tell Ballard. At first, Ballard worries that Martina was complicit, but after checking her phone, she realizes that Manny took advantage of the intern. Thankfully, Martina doesn't confront Manny here and he remains clueless. Later at the team debrief, Ted accuses Martina of being a liability to the team. Colleen calls him aside and scolds him for being too harsh on Martina. Ballard suggests they use Martina as bait to get to Manny and convince him to turn on the others. Martina agrees to the plan as she feels guilty. However, Ballard apologizes and assures her that it's not her fault. Elsewhere, Jake visits to apologize to Ballard for being unable to give her back the Sarah case. He thanks her for her help so far, and Ballard contacts the new detective on the case and leaves another message. The team puts its plan into action and arrests Manny. The guy asks to be taken to a secure facility instead of the station, so the team take him to Ted's office. Manny talks to his lawyers here and agrees to confess everything. He starts by naming all the corrupt cops and identifies Olivaz as the new leader. After getting Manny's statement, Lafont and Ballard bring in the captain. He promises to summon the necessary authorities to take up the case, and Ballard and Zamira are relieved to finally get Olivaz. Tutu congratulates Ballard on getting her guy. Something Tutu says gives Ballard an epiphany about the serial killer's motives. The team gets a secondary win when Lafont gets a possible lead on Gael. He sets up a meeting to collect the boy's DNA and find out if his hunch is actually true. Meanwhile, Ballard starts ignoring Aaron. She turns all her attention to getting Sarah's case back and follows through on her new theory. Somehow, she convinces the captain to give her the case back. She summons the team and shares her theory. Ballard thinks that a killer attacks women who are excelling in life. All the victims were doing well in life at the time of their deaths, however the only exception here happens to be Sarah. After the team leaves, Ballard informs Zamira that the DA will be arresting Olivaz and the others the following morning. Later that night, Colleen and Martina meet for drinks. Ballard hangs back to work on the case with Zamira, and while going through the evidence they notice a lipstick that was found under Sarah's bed. Zamira points out that it's weird since it's from a brand for black women. They also realise that the lipstick was not processed for DNA. The scene cuts to the following morning as Olivaz drops his son at school. Ballard calls him from Manny's burner phone and mocks him right before his arrest. As expected, Olivaz is furious, but Zamira and Ballard enjoy the show as episode 8 comes to an end. Episode 9 of Ballard starts with Ballard getting the DNA analysis from the lipstick. It turns out it didn't belong to Sarah after all, but to a woman named Naomi Bennett. A dive into Naomi's past leads them to consider if she was actually the killer's accomplice. However, that theory is quickly thrown out when they learn that Naomi is a victim. She is the only surviving victim of their killer. Ballard quickly updates the captain and he asks him to drive to Madeira and talk to Naomi. The captain also warns Ballard to expect fallout from the Olivaz's case. On her way out, Ballard runs into an acquaintance who mentions that there are rumours that the seniors are considering bringing Ballard back to homicide. Ballard and Zamira take the drive to Madeira and meet with Naomi. Unfortunately, Naomi is too traumatised and can barely remember her attack. Ballard asks her to take the day to think about helping them. The next morning, they visit Naomi again and ask her to join them in LA. They all hope that a trip will stir up Naomi's memories. Naomi agrees, but even after seeing the evidence, she has a hard time remembering anything useful. She fell apart after the attack and it's too hard for her to revisit the trauma. However, they start retracing Naomi's life days before her attack. As the investigation heats up, Jake Nelson visits Ballard to ask her to talk to the press. Jake's opponent is trying to use his support for the cold case team to discredit him. Although hesitant, Ballard agrees to do an interview alongside Jake to change the narrative. In the meantime, Martina asks Ted to review her statement on the Manny case. After reading Martina's statement, Ted apologizes to her and admits that Manny was a jerk. Martina and Colleen are happy to see Ted finally get their point. LaFont focuses on tracking down Gael and also gets the lead on a suspicious man. The man in question, Casey, has a connection to two victims. However, this lead turns out to be another dead end. Although Casey has a history of violence, he's not their guy. After a long day, Ballard goes back home to work on her board. She also confesses to Tutu that she likes working with the cold case team and she no longer wants to go back to homicide. The following morning, LaFont and Tamira take Naomi to her old apartment. Naomi starts remembering the attack but is unable to recall the culprit's face. In the meantime, Ballard is sidelined in a TV interview when the reporter brings up rumours of her possible replacement. It turns out Jake had considered replacing her as the leader of the team after her attack. Later that evening, Aaron meets with Ballard and breaks up with her. Unfortunately, he wants more but understands Ballard can't give him what he wants. The next morning, Ballard joins Zamira and Naomi at the latter's old workplace. Ballard notices that the salon workers park around the corner and asks the team to widen their search area as a result. By expanding this search, they also go back and look into what was happening back in 2000. Naomi remembers some construction going on at that time. Ballard talks to the building manager and gets a list of the subcontractors working on the construction at that time. In an unexpected twist, Naomi identifies Gary Perlman, Sarah's dad, from the subcontractors list. The killer Jake has been looking for all these years was right under their noses. Ballard immediately calls Ted, who is currently at Gary's house, and informs him of what's going on. Ted tries to play it cool, but he had already mentioned to Gary that they found a living victim. Gary notices that his gig is up and pulls a gun on Ted. Ted also quickly pulls his gun, and the episode ends with Ballard on the phone with Ted as a gunshot rings out. Episode 10 of Ballard starts its finale with Ballard rushing to Gary Perlman's house. She finds the paramedics loading Ted into the ambulance and quickly realizes that Gary took Ted's car and puts out a bolo. Jake arrives a few minutes later and Ballard breaks the sad news to him. As expected, Jake is too shocked to believe his dad is a serial killer. Unfortunately, by the time Ted is rushed to the hospital, he's lost a lot of blood. The doctors try their best, but Ted unfortunately passes away. The captain quickly sets up a team to track Gary and bring him in. While the other officers think that Gary is running, Ballard believes he will come back to kill Naomi. The captain gives her a chance to reach out to Gary through the media. She holds a press conference and tries to convince Gary to turn himself in, and Jake joins her too. But Gary is not one to give up. As the investigation continues here, they discover that Gary was not Sarah's biological dad. They believe Sarah's mum had an affair, and unfortunately, after Ballard's plan fails, the captain asks her to take a step back from the investigation. Meanwhile, Gary has the police running in circles, thinking he has already crossed the border. A few days later, Jake visits the office to give Ballard some of Gary's files. He informs her that he is no longer running for office, but she will have the council's support. Jake is having a hard time wrapping his mind around what his dad did, and he asks Ballard to bring his dad in alive if that's possible. Later that evening, Gary attacks Ballard at the office. A fight ensues and Ballard takes Gary down, and after his arrest, Gary does confess to his crimes, but the case is obviously still ongoing as he has more victims out there. It turns out Gary hated seeing women being happily independent or making choices for themselves. Killing them was his way of punishing them. Bosch later visits Ballard and is stunned that Gary killed Laura because she was happy to quit her waitress job and become a model. Bosch also offers to help Ballard find out more information on Olivaz's case. After doing doing everything possible to locate Gael, Lafont finds a lead. He follows this lead and, after a DNA test, he not only finds the boy, but also reunites him with his mum. Olivas's wife confronts Ballard next for ruining her husband's career. Instead of arguing with her, Ballard sends her to the captain to find out the truth herself. Unfortunately, Bosch learns that the DA has made a deal with Olivas. Out of the 7 corrupt cops, Olivas is the only one who gets to walk free. Ballard is disappointed and confronts the DA about this. She then drives to Olivas's house and has a heated confrontation with him. Olivas mocks her the whole time, but Ballard tells him that his facade is breaking down. She notes that she's already had the captain talk to his wife, and Ballard takes pleasure in knowing that Olivas's wife has already taken the kids and left. After learning that Olivas is walking free, Ballard calls Samira, and they meet for drinks. They find peace that Olivas is no longer a cop, but obviously disappointed in the failed system. As they drink their disappointment away, a cop car pulls up. The show then ends with Ballard getting arrested for Olivas's murder, leaving everything wide open for a potential season 2. After years of living in fear and trauma, Naomi is now able to live in peace. Thanks to her, the other victims were able to get justice, and it's hard to imagine the shock and devastation that Jake must be going through finding out about Gary. To learn that his dad not only killed his sister, but is also a serial killer at large must have messed him up. Of course, what happened to Ted must also have shaken him up too, and it makes us wonder and evaluate how much we know the people around us. It's bewildering how many monsters actually walk among us. It's also scary to think of the man who spent all these years in prison over a murder he didn't commit. Even though he was finally released, he can never recover the time that's been lost. The system failed him big time and all these victims for years. That aside, Ballard made a grave mistake going to confront Olivas. She walks right into a trap, and she's now the suspect in his death, and given their history, things can take an even more dramatic twist here. If we get a new season, which at the time hasn't been confirmed, it will be interesting to see how Ballard comes out of this. Olivas knew a lot about the mafia, and they probably killed him. However, Ballard was also one of the last people seen with Olivas and pulled a gun on him, and it's understandable why she's considered a suspect in his murder. Ultimately, Ballard certainly delivered in this first season. From the first episode to the last, the mystery pulled us in, and it'll be a pity if this show is not greenlit for a new season. However, it does seem to be trending on Prime Video at the moment, ranking as #1 in many countries, so fingers crossed that we get some news on this one in the near future. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.